I want to begin actually just by putting some breaking news on the record. This morning, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, tweeted as follows: "This morning, I proudly ended the Women, Peace, and Security program inside the Department of Defense. WPS is yet another woke, divisive, social justice Biden initiative that overburdens our commanders and troops, distracting from our core task, warfighting. WPS is a United Nations program pushed by feminists and left-wing activists. Politicians fawn over it, troops hate it. DOD will hereby execute the minimum of WPS required by statute and fight to end the program for our next budget. Good riddance, WPS," close quote. I wanted to read this because that tweet contains some glaring inaccuracies that are far beneath the standard we should expect from a Department of Defense. First, WPS is yet another woke, divisive, social justice Biden initiative. WPS was passed by a unanimous vote in the Senate in October of 2017, when the Senate was majority Republican and Donald Trump was president, and he signed it. Does our Secretary of Defense not know the difference between a bill that was passed by the Biden administration and one that was passed and signed in the Trump administration? Secondly, politicians fawn over it, troops hate it. I return to the hearing this committee had to consider the confirmation of General Kaine. And I read the following testimony. Senator Shaheen, General Kaine, congratulations on your nomination. One of the things that we discussed was the Women, Peace, and Security legislation that was signed by President Trump during his first term. And it mandates that women should be at the table in conflict resolution and peace negotiations. And at DOD, that's meant having women involved in security cooperation programs that really give us, I think, an advantage over our adversaries like China and Russia. Just for the record, are you familiar with the WPS program, General Kaine? General Kaine, I am, Senator, yes. Senator Shaheen, and you believe that it's a DEI program? General Kaine, I do not. Senator Shaheen, thank you. Can you provide some examples of the operational advantage that, from your perspective, this gives us? General Kaine, well, Senator, I can just give you my own personal recollections from being deployed. Before this was precursors of the program, but when we would go out into the field and after concluding an assault, we would have female members who would speak with those women and children who were on the objective, and they would help us to understand the human terrain in new and novel ways. And so WPS is, I think, a program that really helps us to understand the full spectrum of challenges that are in front of us. Close quote from the testimony of our confirmed chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. If the Secretary of Defense cannot understand the difference between a Biden initiative and a Trump administration, and when the Secretary of Defense claims that troops hate something that the newly confirmed head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff appreciates, I got to add this to the 1,000 questions about the judgment of this secretary that I've already raised.
Now pay attention here, because this is the turning point. The moment Kaine uses the military's own testimony to dismantle the claim that WPS is some woke program, this is where the facts take over.
I'm stunned at the lack of professionalism that this tweet demonstrates. Look, we aired out pretty carefully at this hearing the Secretary's own antipathy to women in service and his own track record of poor treatment of women in leadership positions. The fact that he doesn't like WPS, that's one thing. But the fact that he claims that it's a Biden initiative when it isn't, an initiative that was supported unanimously by a Republican majority Senate, and that troops hate it when the newly confirmed head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff testifies to its value, I find shocking.
What we just watched here is not just a moment of political disagreement. It's a rare moment where a senator uses the weight of truth to confront deliberate misinformation coming directly from a sitting Secretary of Defense. Tim Kaine doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't resort to theatrics. Instead, he does something far more devastating. He brings receipts. The Women, Peace, and Security program, WPS, is not some woke Biden initiative, as Pete Hegseth tweeted. It's a bipartisan national security tool rooted in evidence, deployed by our military, and passed unanimously in 2017 under a Republican Senate and signed by Donald Trump. Kaine makes that clear because the contrast matters. One side is basing decisions on ideology, the other on documented history. Kaine's calm dismantling of Hegseth's tweet reveals something much deeper, a crisis of judgment at the top of the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense publicly characterized WPS as a left-wing social justice distraction, but the military leaders who actually operate in conflict zones describe it as a strategic advantage. And Kaine smartly uses the testimony of General Kaine, now chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to expose that contradiction. When the person responsible for overseeing the armed forces says the program strengthens mission effectiveness, yet the secretary himself says troops hate it, it becomes clear this isn't about troop preference, it's about political narrative. And it raises an uncomfortable question. If the secretary cannot identify the difference between a bipartisan law signed during the Trump years and a Biden policy initiative, how many other decisions are being filtered through ideology instead of facts? Kaine also points out something important. WPS was not designed to check a box or advance a political agenda. It came from the lived realities of soldiers who learned that understanding the human terrain, the women, families, and communities embedded in a conflict zone, can save lives, prevent escalation, and build trust that brute force alone can't achieve. In other words, this is smart warfare, informed warfare, and effective diplomacy. The U.S. figured this out through experience, not activism. By highlighting these testimonies, Kaine shows that Hegseth's framing isn't just inaccurate, it's professionally irresponsible. It undermines the very people who rely on these tools to keep Americans safe. And when the Secretary of Defense misrepresents facts to fuel an ideological talking point, it creates a dangerous disconnect between military reality and political theater. Kaine's commentary transitions into a separate line of questioning on recruitment challenges, reminding us that the world we live in requires talent, expertise, and innovation, not culture war distractions that weaken morale and distort mission priorities. This moment matters because Kaine isn't simply correcting a tweet. He's defending the integrity of the Defense Department, calling out a pattern of hostility toward women in service, and highlighting how inaccurate rhetoric undermines national security. He frames the issue not as political combat, but as a standard of professionalism Americans should expect from their leaders. And that's what resonates. Leadership isn't about owning the libs, canceling programs, or scoring social media hits. Leadership is about accuracy, responsibility, respect for the people on the ground doing the work. This hearing exposes the difference between politicians who treat defense like a culture war playground and leaders who understand the stakes. Kaine's message is simple. The truth still matters, facts still matter, and national security should never be sacrificed for ideology. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so we can keep bringing clarity to the political noise and elevate the voices fighting for a stronger, more honest democracy.